Hear me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. It is my privilege to introduce our guest speaker, Megan Seel, who has very graciously agreed to join us today. Her journey began in what she describes as a small town in upstate New York with one traffic light and the next traffic light being 20 miles away. From there, she is currently an executive leader for HR technology with GE Corporate. In 20 years of her exciting career at GE, she's had a leadership role with GE Digital Technology Function, worked with GE Gas Power, Renewable Energy, Nuclear, Oil and Gas, and other digital divisions. She earned her MBA from State University at Albany, New York, and her bachelor's in computer science from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in New York State. She lives in West Carlton, New York, and I hope that town has more than one traffic light with her two sons, Sammy, age 9, Benji, age 6, and her husband, Darren. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Megan for sharing her journey, her stories to celebrate the International Women's Day. Thank you. Megan, over to you.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Kamo. I do have to admit, West Charlton has 0 traffic lights. But the closest one is only a couple miles away, so we're okay. Folks, I'm very excited to share my story with you today. And really what I am here to talk to you about is my life. It is not just to stand here and tell you about my life, though. My hope is that while I walk you through my career and the stories that I've accumulated throughout this career, that you'll find something in my story that might be relatable to you. So as I'm telling my story, if you hear something, you're like, oh, I've been there before, that is my goal. Or maybe you hear something, you're like, ooh, that is way different than my experience, but it's really interesting to hear another perspective. I'm hopeful that each one of you finds that moment, that light bulb that makes my story relate to you. And if I do, then I feel this day will be a success. I want to start by telling you about my career. As Kamal mentioned, I've been working at the General Electric Company for 20 years. It's my entire career. Across those 20 years, I have held 15 different roles. And I am not going to tell you about each one because I think it would bore you to death. What I want to talk to you about instead is a couple seasons that I group my different roles across. As I look across the entire career, and as Kamal mentioned in the introduction, I have always been in GE's IT function. And so my general reason for being my entire career has been focused on implementing business change facilitated by technology. But as I do that implementation of business change, I've done so at varying ways. So if you look at the first season of my career, my project management season, this was the beginning. I was an individual contributor. I had 1 or 2 projects that were mine to own and manage and lead. And I was working with functional stakeholders as well as implementation teams to get those projects over the line. The second season, fairly quickly into my career, I transitioned to leading people. And I started to really learn the art of people leadership. Now, in parallel with those people leadership, leading global teams, I always still had my hands on program leadership too. So IT programs that I was leading in partnership with my team members and my functional stakeholders. Season 3 of my career, I call it leading in a matrix. Now, this is not the Keanu Reeves matrix. This is matrix leadership, which to me means leading a broad program, collaborating with teams in many functions, but I had no direct hierarchical power. All of my influence was based on different tactics. I didn't have a team during these times. My programs were big, but my team was all where I could find the resources across the matrix. The latest season in my career, I don't know what to call it yet because it's just one role so far. So I still have to figure out how I would label the season. I don't know how long the season's going to last before I'll figure out how to label it. I don't know if I'd call it executive leadership, or maybe I'd say I'm back to a season of global team and program leadership. I'm not sure, but I'll figure it out. There is one weird tidbit I want to clear off of this slide before I hop into some other stories. The weird tidbit is that I actually already know my next role. As some of you may know, the General Electric company is separating into 3 independent companies. And so right now at the corporate level, I am helping with that separation. Once the separation of the HR technologies is over, I'll move over to GE Aerospace to catch that HR technology for one of the 3 spin codes. And so that future role linked with my current role, that's my current season. But what I get most excited about as I talk about the seasons of my career is I know this is not my last season. I don't know what the story is going to shape to in the future, but I know that there's going to be more seasons of my career and my life coming. And, maybe in 10 years, I'll come back and tell a different story about the different seasons that have happened since then. I have a few stories to tell you that cut across my career. But before I do, I have a favor to ask. As Gwen mentioned in the introduction, I'm not going to speak for this entire time. I'm not going to monologue for this entire time. I really want to make sure that this conversation is tailored to what you want it to become. So I'll tell you a couple stories to set the seed, but I really, really would love to hear your questions. If you have something that you want to probe into because I said it and I wanted more, let's talk about that. Or maybe you have a question that's unrelated to what I tell you, but you think maybe I'll have a perspective on it. Hit me with that too. So please, I'm really looking forward to your interaction coming soon. But let me tell you a few stories to set that seed. So my hope with these stories is to embody the Inspire Inclusion International Women's Day theme. My first story, I'm going to tell you about the challenges and pitfalls of being a woman in corporate America. Spoiler alert, I haven't faced many, but I'll talk a little bit more about that. The second story I'm going to talk to you about is work-life balance, and more specifically, working parenthood. And there are definitely challenges with that. The third story I want to talk to you about is an odd situation I've faced in my career. You'll see a lot of these roles happen very quickly one after another. That's not normal. I am currently in my 6th role in a row eliminated. And as I've faced into those 6 roles in a row eliminated, I'll walk you through a little bit of the wild journey that I've had to go through as a result. Many female leaders will stand up and say, particularly on International Women's Day, about the challenges and pitfalls of being a woman in corporate America. Gwen just rattled off the statistics of how we know women and men are not equally represented in technology in particular. I imagine many of you that are out there and are women on this phone, you have your own stories about how you personally have experienced that glass ceiling. I don't have those stories. My entire life and my entire career, I've never felt anything that I would refer to as the glass ceiling. I am absolutely not suggesting it doesn't exist. I just personally haven't encountered it. And I think there's 2 reasons for this. The first one, I go back to my childhood. Many of you will acknowledge our childhood shapes us so much. I grew up in a home with a big brother, a mom, and a dad. And my brother and I were raised as equals by parents who took equal responsibilities. We were given the same chores. We were taught the same skills. There was never a concept in my childhood of woman's work and man's work. My brother and I learned to sew together, and we learned to do woodworking together. One day for chores, I would do the dishes and he would cut wood. The next day, I would bring in the firewood and he would fold the laundry. Now, this I know is not everybody's story. It was not the case for all of my friends growing up. And I don't think it was something my parents did exclusively to eliminate gender bias. It was just their personal approach on how they work together. But it had a fascinating outcome on my mindset. I never really walked out of that household thinking women are different than men. And I took that almost naivete to work. But then when I started work, since my very first days as an intern, I've always had awesome women in IT to look up to. These awesome women, they forged a path for me. They proved to me that women not only deserve a seat at the table, but women can drive the whole table, the whole conversation. I've never felt, because of these sponsors and mentors and role models, I've never had to question whether I should speak up because I'm a woman. That's not to say I've not had other imposter syndrome moments for many other reasons, but it's not because of my gender. And some statistics to kind of tell this story, and I know these statistics are unique, but if I think about the 15 roles that I had across my 20-year career, I've had 19 different people leaders. 10 of them were women and 9 were men. Of the departmental CIOs over top of those roles, I had a female CIO over 7 of my roles. And I even had the joy of looking all the way up to the top of the IT function in General Electric. And there was a female CIO at the very top of the GE IT hierarchy for 8 years of my career. I don't know why I got so lucky, but I do know that I am lucky. I have to tell you, I did not purposely seek roles with female leaders, but these statistics I know are not normal. And I know this is not everyone's story. I have a very close friend that works in the mechanical engineering function in another major corporation. And she tells me stories of having no female leaders higher than middle management. She even heard of a promotion that she was considered for until they found out she was pregnant, and they never called her. And she spoke up. She went to senior HR leadership that she worked with and was comfortable based on her work with her company's diversity councils. And she gained a female sponsor. And in combination with her female sponsor and herself, with that she was riled up, they pushed for an ally program. They implemented unconscious bias trainings. They required diverse slates for every job posting. And these advocacy actions that she took, they earned her some great visibility that secured her promotion and forged the path for others. So I want to tie this back to all of you at Hexaware. And I want to talk to 3 different populations of you. So first, for those of you that identify as diverse leaders, your leaders that are not like the majority of your population, I want you to take this as a call to action. Forge that path. Forge the path for those around you. Prove that your seat at the table can be the next person like you seat at that table too. I also want to call out to the non-diverse leaders, gentlemen, and have a call to action for you as well. I need you to be an ally and a sponsor. Gwen talked about this. You need to acknowledge my story is very unique in this world of technology. Most women and other diverse employees, they do face a glass ceiling, and it's your job to pull them through it. Now, my third set of folks I want to call to specifically is for those of you out there, you don't necessarily identify as leaders, but you're looking for someone to look up to. And you look through your hierarchy and you don't see anyone like you, whether it be gender or race or whatever uniquely identifies you. Then I would suggest you do 2 things. Number 1, you might have to cast your net a little wider. If you don't see someone like you in your immediate organization, look broader. Look at adjacent organizations. there's somebody out there that can be your role model and sponsor. You just might have to look a little farther for a little while. The second thing I want to ask you, though, is to find some moments to be brave, like my friend was at her company. Take that stand. Become the leader that others look up to. Forge that path for the people that are coming after you. And I know this is hard, but I believe that if you find those brave moments and find an ally to bring you there, you can break that glass ceiling for yourself and others. The next topic I want to talk to you about is work-life balance. If I only had 10 seconds on this, I would say work-life balance is hard. I would almost say that it's impossible. And I am not a role model in how to balance work and life. I don't think I've ever mastered it. I'm not sure anybody can. Let me back up a little bit. I told you about my career, but let me tell you about my life. I'm a mother of 2 boys. One is almost 7. I know Kamal said 6, but if he heard me say anything but almost 7, oof. And the other one is 9. My husband is a PhD chemist and he also works full time. So on top of my full-time career, I have a second, or maybe it's more like 2 or 3 more full-time jobs as a wife and a mom. My kids are just getting involved in everything. They're at that age, particularly sports, and I love sports. So I'm quite involved in their sports lives. I coach or I assist the coaches. I'm even on the board of directors of our town's baseball league. And now if you think about the age of my kids, and you're good at math, which most of you probably are, you might notice that my kids are young enough that more than half of my career happened before I became a mom. And before the kids were around, I was what you would consider a stereotypical ladder climber. So if you remember my seasons, I was an early people leader. Before my first was born, I had an extended organization I was leading of almost 75 people. And I was leading a program of more than 200 Matrix project team members. From the outsiders looking in lens, I was bound to keep growing. But I had a new adventure in life. And I learned very quickly after my first was born that parenthood rocks your world, or at least it rocked mine. And so if you think back to the seasons of my career, some of you may have been sitting there scratching your head at the transition between season 2 and 3. It's a little odd. Would it make more sense if I explained that my first son was born in 2015, right when the seasons changed? Parenthood was the impetus for me to change my career trajectory. I was on that corporate ladder doing large, formal leadership positions. And parenthood just, I didn't know what to do. That job I could not master, I could not figure out, and I needed to take some time for that. So I purposely took what many thought was a weird career step. And I went to these matrix leadership positions where I had less formal authority and responsibility. I still stayed visible, I still stayed relevant, but I gave myself a little room to figure out what it was like to be a parent. And I wouldn't do it any differently. Because as I look at where I am today, parenthood has shaped me to be the leader that I am. And when I think about the impact that parenthood has, the number one thing that parenthood did for me is it broke me of a lifelong addiction to perfection. There is no such thing as a perfect parent, as those of you with kids know. It is impossible. It is humiliating and infuriating and undeniably true that you cannot be perfect at. And there was a life lesson in that I really, really loved. I also find that I'm a better listener because I'm a parent. And what I listen to more acutely is life situations of the people that I work with. By taking the time to really understand everyone's life situation, I'm finding that people are feeling more comfortable to bring their authentic selves to work. And as they bring their authentic selves to work, they're happier. And happier people accomplish greater things. And I'm grateful for parenthood to teach me to listen more closely. I also found, because I had so much of the leadership stuff behind me before I became a mom, that I was a better mom because of my leadership lessons. We all learn in corporate America about negotiation skills, for example. I gotta tell you, there is no better test of my negotiation skills than my intelligent and very scheming little boys. We also learn a lot as working professionals on time management, but I have applied and grown in those skills exhaustively as a parent because there is no greater time management challenge than being a full-time employee and a full-time parent. Now, keep in mind, my career seasons didn't end when I took this weird step. When I was ready, when I had kind of gotten a little bit of a hold of the parenthood thing, certainly haven't mastered it because I don't know who can. But when I was ready, I jumped back on the ladder and I started to climb again. And part of me feels like I might have climbed faster once I jumped back on because of how much parenthood shaped me. So for those of you out there that are parents, I just want to tell you to keep your chin up. You're doing a great job. You are not doing a perfect job. There is no such thing as a singular definition of work-life balance. But you're doing the best you can, and that's all we can ask. It's all any of us can do. And I know some of you out there aren't parents yet, or aren't going to be parents, and that's okay. So for those of you out there, I want to call to my perfectionists in the audience. If you are a perfectionist, I want to recommend that you go outside your comfort zone, test your limits, find situations where you can't be perfect, and embrace that beauty and imperfection. Find the freedom in humbly admitting that good enough. Now, it's easy for me to sit here and tell you, just go do that, right? But you're a perfectionist, and that sounds probably very, very intimidating. So I would recommend a couple tactics to think about is maybe you could take a stretch role, maybe a side project outside of the norm of your normal life, normal work. Is there something else that you could say, I don't know how to do that. I don't know if I'm going to be perfect at that, but I'll try and I'll learn from it. Or if it sounds very intimidating to take on a side like work project, use your safe zones. Use your employee resource groups within your company or community groups or volunteer opportunities and raise your hand for something that you just can't be perfect at and find that beauty in good enough. So I want to tell you one last story about my career. I mentioned in the beginning, I am in my 6th role in a row eliminated. Now, only one of those 6 roles was I told, Megan, your last day is this date, and after that date, you're on the street. You got to find something before then, or you got to find something outside. But the risk could have happened in all of the others, and the writing was absolutely on the wall that those roles wouldn't exist long, and if I left them, they would not be backfilled. So I had 6 times where I had to figure out, what am I going to do? And 6 times I had to realize over and over and over again that no one is taking care of my next career move except myself. So 6 times I really had to think, what am I going to do? And what I realized is I needed to marry up the power of introspection with the power of my network. And now when I think about introspection, the first couple in my weird string of 6, they were tough. Like that was a big emotional roller coaster to really think, what am I going to do? But what I realized is I just had to take stock. I had to take a mental inventory of my capabilities, these skills. What am I good at? Like, what's the core capability that's me? And I had to marry that with, what do I want? What am I passionate about? What do I love to do? And then I had to figure out a way for these capabilities and these passions to come together to actually be applicable to somebody that would hire me. And what I realized in my casual way of going about it is I was working on my personal brand. And I know you guys learned a lot about personal branding. What I found out of my process was that my brand is built on a foundation of strength in distilling complex situations into simple problems to solve. And my passion is helping the widest number of people that was possible. I was motivated more by helping people than I was motivated by the size of my budget or my title or any other perceptions of the importance of my role. And so that was my brand. And I'm sure, especially since you just had a session on this a day or two ago, many of you have been advised to work on defining your own personal brand. I have a theory that many of you haven't done it though. And I think that's okay. What I've seen in my experience as I've talked to folks is the people that take the time to define their brand do so because of some impetus event. For me, it was jobs eliminated. 6 times I had to figure out, what am I going to do? But for others that I've encountered, other people are going through some tough, either personal or professional times, and they're just fundamentally unhappy. And they're sitting there thinking, what am I going to do? But there's also an impetus event of a new opportunity, a new and exciting and big and something you never would have thought of. And I've seen people really think about their brand in those moments too, of what am I going to do? So folks, combine the 90 minutes you spent earlier this week with the story that I just told and figure out, are you facing into an impetus event that you have to take on that hard and courageous task of defining your own brand, figuring out what are you good at, what are you passionate about, and how the heck does that apply to a job? And I know you got a lot of guidance probably earlier in these sessions about how to define your personal brand. I would probably add a little bit to that there are online skills assessment tools out there that can help you narrow in on what are your strengths and your passions. I would also highly recommend you talk to a mentor if you have one. If you don't have a mentor, you can also talk to a candid peer. I know I want to be very purposeful. I said a candid peer. You don't want to sit down and talk about your personal brand with someone who's going to listen to it and say, yeah, that's great. Because that doesn't help you refine it. It doesn't help you learn. You want to sit down with that peer of yours that's going to say, well, that's interesting. And are you sure that that's the strength you want to tout? What about this other thing that I see every day as I work with you? Or your passions sound really interesting. But where have you found that that applies to anything? So find those folks that are really going to challenge you and your personal brand will be better. Now, I mentioned 6 times I had to go through, what am I going to do? And I did my introspection. I figured out what my brand was. And then I realized I still have to go find something to do with that. And that's where my network came in. The power of my network was the key to going from what am I going to do to, oh, okay, that's next, and landing that next thing. Every role I landed in this weird string of 6, I can tie back to the power of my network. One of them, I went and I worked with a people leader I'd worked with before. Another one, I ended up working for someone who was a classmate of mine at a leadership development course that I went to. Another one, I went all the way back to my internship days, and 15 years later, I worked for a classmate of mine from when we were interns. And at one low point in my career, because I did 6 times in a row of, what am I going to do? It sounds like today, I probably did it with a smile on my face. The smile's because I'm excited to talk to you. At one point in time, I went through a massive spiral of self-doubt. I lost all my self-confidence. And a past colleague and friend pulled me out. He noticed my spiral and he's like, Megan, I've got a project that you can knock out of the park, and I need you to take this side thing on and go find yourself again and get some work done for me. I was like, I don't know. This all sounds like stuff I just feel like I'm failing at. He's like, nope, just do it. And so he sponsored me, he advocated for me, he pulled me through. And through that project, I rediscovered myself. I rediscovered my value proposition. And what's interesting is, in the same period of one of my gnarliest spirals in my life, I was in the largest volunteer leadership position that I've ever held. In our GE Women's Network, I was leading a hub. It's just like, a location, a set of locations where 2,000 women were looking to me and a couple of my peers to help women figure out how to help women. And so I was standing in front of these folks, leading them through how to help each other while I was like rotting inside. But what I realized is the combination of that side project and this women's network role, it gave me an outlet to practice, a safe zone to prove to others, but really more importantly, to prove to myself that I am capable, I am valuable, and my network was therefore able to pull me out of my spiral. Now, as you think about this, many people wonder about what is networking really? Like all of us typically think about networking events as those golf events that all the dudes go to, or that after work happy hour thing. Like that's a networking event. That's how I build my network. If you listen back to the examples I just touted about my network helping me through, none of those people were the people that I met at a happy hour. Those people were different aspects of my network. And so let me just take a second and define to you. To me, networking is any opportunity you have and take to make truly authentic connections with people. Because your network is all of the people that you have truly authentic connections with. Those are the connections that you need to open the doors when you need to. So when you think of networking, don't just think of that golf event and the happy hours that I know some of us dread to go to sometimes. Think about the people that you work with every day. They are your network. Think about the people that you've worked with in the past. They are your network. And yes, the leaders or colleagues that maybe you only have the chance to connect with at the company happy hours, as long as you find a way to make authentic connections with them, they are your network. But also think about your family. Talk about very authentic connections. They're a part of your network. Your personal friends are a part of your network. And any of the colleagues, family members, and friends of anyone in your network, they can also be your network. So when you think about this definition of network, I want to go back to some advice that was on my career slide, and it's on this slide as well. And it's completely grammatically incorrect. But I really want to recommend to all of you to leave all your bridges unburned. You need to take care of your own career. And you need to put all of your resources, including your network connections, to work for yourself. So make sure if you're sitting in that leadership development course next to somebody in your company that you're like, I'm never going to see you again. I'm not going to do anything. You don't know that. You don't know if you can make that authentic connection. You don't know what that person's going to do for you in the future. So folks, I have many more stories that I'd love to share with you from my career, but I just wanted to set the seed with these few to start. And now the floor is yours. I would really love for you to shape the rest of this discussion. What questions do you have for me? What did I say already that you want to probe into? Or what questions do you have about other things that maybe you think I might have a perspective on? So Gwen, I'll turn it to you and hit me with the best shot.
Yeah, thank you so much, Megan, for your fantastic story. So powerful and inspiring. So I think a lot of people have enjoyed that, and we have received fantastic questions. So let me start with a compliment, because somebody says the company I stayed longest with and arguably most successful in tried to fire me 3 times. So org changes or strategy changes, but no burned bridges, and a network made a difference. Each time I had the opportunity to step up to the next big thing, and change is a good thing. So thank you so much for the advice.
Awesome. That's great. I'm glad to hear that.
Good. Somebody asks, when first starting off in your career with project management, did you have a clear career direction on where you wanted to go from that first role?
No, absolutely not. I was a computer science major in college. I was educated to be a pure programmer. And what I knew out of my college days was that I was good at programming, but I missed people. And back 20 years ago, if you were a programmer, for those of you that might, maybe your parents are that old, but programmers were kind of set aside in a room and just do your thing, right? It wasn't nearly as collaborative of a software development life as it is today. And so I wanted to marry up my people skills. I did a lot of volunteer leadership opportunities within college. I wanted to marry that up with my technical core. And so that's why I was glad for GE to enter me into project management. But I didn't know what that meant. It was not necessarily a part of my education. And I didn't know where it would go. I wasn't sure as I looked at those CIOs if CIOs were what I wanted to be. And I still honestly don't know what I want to do when I grow up necessarily. All I know in terms of roles, that is, all I know is I just want to keep helping people. And if I can keep helping the maximum number of people, then I'll do that and I'll follow the path as it goes. My career path looks fairly singular if you look at it at a macro level of its IT. I've always done IT, but I've done IT for parts warehouses. I've done IT for finance people. I've done IT for commercial people. I've done IT for HR people, et cetera, et cetera. That randomness of functions that I've supported, different technologies every time, that I had no idea where it was going to go, but I've just followed my path to help people and we'll see where it takes me next.
Thank you. We go to the next question, but first, Shreya, can you please put the link in the chat so that people can already start giving feedback, and release the slides so that we have Megan in full screen. Thank you so much, Shreya. So somebody else is asking, you gave such a long time to one company, and it's a little bit of what you just mentioned already, but you gave such a long time to one company. Did at any point you felt like you're stagnating, like there's so much to explore, but you stayed at the same place and never tried the other options? This person sees so many people asking to take the step and take the risk and to get out of the comfort zone. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I certainly have considered in all of my what am I going to do moments, which one of those moments was going to be the one where I looked outside. And there were several opportunities that came up as I looked around. And what I found was one of my biggest value propositions is my network. And my network is really strong here at GE. And so I can offer the power of my network to my teams as and when I continue at GE. Now, that's not to say that my external network's not pretty awesome too, because there's a lot of people that have left GE in the 20 years I've been here too. So I know I've come to terms over the last couple, what am I going to do, that my external network's probably pretty awesome too, but I still continue to ride the wave forward on my internal one. I've never felt stagnant. The roles that I have done, there've been 15 of them, so I haven't had time to be stagnant. The longest I've ever been in a role is right now, and I do not feel stagnant at all. So all of the changes that I've made, all of the experiences that I've had as a result of my network and my brand have been very, very diverse because GE's huge. And it's a big company, and I worked for a power company, I worked for like a gas power company, I worked for a parts warehouse, I worked for a nuclear company, I worked for an oil and gas company, I worked for a commercial, like sales firm. I've worked now in an HR shared services function for a couple of years. Those could be all different companies and all different experiences on their own. They just so happen to be under one umbrella. So In my experience, no, I've not stagnated at all. I don't regret staying with the company at all because my network is so strong and the people are what make me happy. It's not to say the future seasons of all the future seasons of my career will be with the General Electric company, but for now, it's worked.
Thank you. Thank you so much for explaining that. The next question is from somebody sharing that this person has been leading a large organization in the past, so 150 FTEs, but found over time that this person had more fun as a non-hierarchy leader. So running projects and work with young people and change the culture through leading by example. This includes coaching and empowering women. Quite honestly, leadership is not only hierarchical power, but it's often overlooked in enterprise organizations. Any idea how to promote these kind of leaders to gain more visibility and telling their story of doing things differently?
Oh,
big question, huh?
Yeah, it's a big question. So I can relate to you. The most fun job I ever had out of those 15 was smack in the middle of my global team and program leadership season. I led GE Power's IT leadership development program, entry-level leadership program. So much fun, so energizing, so exciting. And yeah, there was a little hierarchical power, but it was more just the exuberance of it. And a lot of people looked at that kind of a role and they're like, that's not the path to CIO. And that's when I started realizing myself that I don't care what other people thought the path was for me. I needed to forge my own path to be happy. And so maybe my advice to you would be, and this is kind of adjacent, maybe a little skipping past some of the heart of your question, because that's a beast of a question. But it's okay to keep doing what makes you happy. If you're not happy, then why are you toiling through so much? Visibility-wise, those roles, you do have to claw a little bit harder to get your visibility, right? Because from a hierarchical perspective, you're not looked at in the same way, but your outcomes should be what speak. And if you're leading these major programs and you're fostering this intense culture shift, those outcomes should be what gains you the visibility. Now, you might have to work with your sponsors to say, hey, make sure you find ways to give me credit for this. So you just have to do a little bit of more self-advocacy in those matrix roles than maybe what the normal hierarchical ones would do. The other side of things is you have to look inside and figure out if the visibility is really what motivates you. It doesn't have to. You don't have to be visible if that's not what motivates you. If you want to continue to have fun in work and you're finding the great jobs that are fun and that's what motivates you, then own it. It's perfectly fine.
I think that's brilliant advice, because that's also what I feel during the last 40 minutes that you're speaking. The passion just bursts through the screen, right? So I think, enjoying your role and enjoying your career has a lot to do with passion. Find that path that really suits you. And it also, I think, comes with knowing who you are and what values you stand for. And that is something that you can grow into. But that is what I think I like the best of today that I see with you. So that's at least something that I can give back to you.
Thank you.
Somebody says, thank you so much. Very encouraging, motivating, and a learning experience. I'm going to share this with my spouse. So just so.
Oh, yay. That's the best. Parents, if your parents, I'll share that part because that resonates.
Good. Somebody asked, thanks, Megan, for this inspirational story. My question is, in light of the ongoing digital transformation and remote work trends, what are some emerging opportunities and challenges for women in tech, and how can they prepare for them?
I think, so I'm going to focus a little bit for now on the remote work side of things. Let me clear the digital side of things. Digital transformation overall is fascinating. And with all of us being in the IT, digital technology worlds, we're right there with it. We've got to keep changing. And so the challenge with being in this function is that we've got to keep up. And that's not easy. But it's not easy for men or women. So I wouldn't say that's a gender thing necessarily to tie back to, but it is just a challenge we all have to face into as technology leaders and technologists. The remote work thing, I see it's huge, particularly for women, to open doors that we may never have had open before. I have 2 sick children upstairs right now. If this was not a remote session, I would have had to cancel this thing. And I love this stuff. Like this, I get so much energy out of you guys having me here because I was able to do this remotely, because we were able to meet and collaborate remotely. And yes, my 2 sick children are upstairs and you haven't seen them because my husband's also up there too. He works remotely as well. Remote work allows us to be professionals when we need to be and authentic people when we need to be. And I think it makes work-life balance so much easier. My frog is, yes, it's my kid's toy, but I've adopted it. If anybody's on a conference call with me after 3 p.m. and the bus has already dropped the kids off, the kids are a part of every call. Doesn't detract from my work effectiveness. Everyone just knows if you need Megan, you get Sammy and Benji too. And we're all going to help you get better and help you wherever we can. So I think the remote work thing has opened some doors for us to grow. The fact that we can lead from home means we can be parents and we can be professionals and we can get more and more of those opportunities. The fact that COVID has taught us that flexible work is a real thing means we as parents can run our children to the doctor's mid-work day and come back and still accomplish great things. Productivity didn't drop off in COVID, much to everybody's shock. It accelerated a journey that I think was coming anyway, but I'm very, very energized by it. And I have about 45 minutes before I have to take one of my sons to the pediatrician. So I'm living it.
Well said, well said. Another question. What advice would you give to women who are considering transitioning into leadership roles within the tech industry, particularly if they face barriers or self-doubt?
Self-doubt is real. It is it is a differentiator between women and men. We all doubt ourselves. My mom has been nagging me since I was a kid because I shouldn't should on myself so much. Don't should on yourself so much. It's okay to doubt a little bit, but you have to not let it get in your way. If it's a doubt that you have and no one else has about you, it's inside you to fix it. So as you stand there and you think, I don't know if I'm the right one for that job, but you have a few other folks, you got to rely on your network, consult your network to build that confidence, to shut your self-doubt up. I forgot the right word. Make that self-doubt go away by using your support team and then run past it and go. Leadership is not easy. Leadership can be fun. You will never be perfect at leadership. Leadership is no different than parenthood. You're going to do some things that are going to be wonderful. And you're going to do some things that will be like, oops, not going to do that again. And that's okay. Every human you lead is different. So just like every kid you raise, you got to sit down and you got to learn who those people are. And we as women are very, very well positioned to listen and commiserate. And that makes us fantastic leaders. So own it. Own the wonderfulness that is us as women and apply it in a way that differentiates you from maybe your male peers.
Yeah, Yeah, and acknowledge your accomplishments, right? And speak up. It's not bragging. It's just based on facts. It's what you achieve. It's what you stand for. So it's so empowering for all of us, but also for women to focus on that more and more. So I think we're going to move to the final question, Megan. We had still a zillion questions for you, waiting for you, but moving also to the close of the session. Before I ask the last question, please double check the chat. There's a survey there, 1 minute survey. Please fill it in. It's fantastic to hear your feedback and your opinion about this session. And Kamal, I will ask you to close the session if you're there. But let us. Hey, hi. Let us first go to the final question. That is, in your opinion, Megan, what are some of the most important skills or qualities that have contributed to your success as a leader in the tech industry?
I think probably the biggest thing is, well, there's twofold. One, it's my people orientedness, right? So I love people. I love the uniqueness of people. I love to embrace the value that people can bring. And so I've always really been focused on humans, their authentic selves, and how that works. And it's worked very well for me. It's developed great followership for me, and it's yielded great results. The second thing is I have always been accoladed as a clear thinker. And I go way back to my computer science days, where those of us that are educated in computer science are trained, if this, then that, else this. We are trained to break down problems to the very lowest level of syntax in order to solve them. I do that every day. I haven't written a line of code in 20 years, but I do that every day. And so that clear thinking that's ingrained in me as a programmer to break down problems and find ways to solve the individual problem has turned very big, complex, nebulous, weird situations into problems we've solved, accomplished, and moved on from. And so those outcomes have developed my brand of getting stuff done. And my followership and my people-orientedness has developed my brand as a leader that people want to work with. And the two of those things for me are how I've gotten where I am today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Megan. Over to you, Kamal.
Well, thank you, Megan, and Gwen, and Shreya for organizing this. Whatever I say will dilute, the message. Megan, to the point that Gwen earlier mentioned, the energy and the passion and the honesty is really coming out, and I really appreciate you speaking your heart out and talking to us, talking to the folks. Thank you. So that's that. I think for me, it's less about what I say right now, is more about, what actions, what do we do, I think that's the important. I must say that at the end of this conversation, certainly this is a topic of high interest, given that, at home I live with my mom, my daughter, my wife, but hopefully I kind of understand things a little better, and hopefully we do, and we nudge things in the right direction to the statistics that Gwen mentioned earlier, within Hexaware, in our personal life as well. This was a very, very, very an amazing session, Megan, and I really appreciate. Thank you very much, and I mean every bit of it. And I also feel the more I say, the more I'm going to dilute what people will take with them, out of the session. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kamal. And thank you to Gwen for inviting me. And thank you to all of you for listening. I very, very much appreciate the time.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Kamal. Thank you, Shreya. And thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow, hopefully, during the award show. Bye-bye.
Take care, all.